We are live.
Hello and welcome to our ISE Fireside webinar. We're thrilled to have you here with us this afternoon. Our sponsor today is ShieldX. Our topic is Head in the Clouds. Don't forget about cybersecurity. We're going to have a great discussion with all of you. But before we get started, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping things for us. First, viewers that view our webinar today to its completion will earn 1 CPE, but you do need to stay on with us the entire time. In the survey window, once that appears, in the chat window I should say, the survey will appear, a link. Let us know your CPE number and we will reply following the webinar with information on how to record this program and deposit it into your CPE account. So don't exit the webinar early, otherwise you won't be able to give us that information and we will not be able to send you the deposit information as well. We're also going to have a Q&A section of our program today, and we encourage you to ask your questions as you think of them, but do so in the Q&A chat window, and that will help us have some questions ready for you to answer, but we will answer them at the later part of our program this morning. Or this afternoon. I guess if you're calling in from the West Coast, it is still the morning, and if you are joining us from the East Coast, it certainly is this afternoon. I'm pleased to introduce to all of you Glenn Langstrom, who's the SVP of Sales and Customer Service for ShieldX, and he's going to tell us a little bit about ShieldX today.
Thank you, Marcy, and thank you to our panelists for taking the time today to lead us in today's discussions, and of course, thank you to all of our attendees for joining us for today's webinar. ShieldX Networks, which is headquartered in San Jose, California, provides agentless network security software that provides application layer microsegmentation for both on-prem VMware data centers, as well as an organization's public cloud data center deployments in Azure, AWS, and we very soon plan to add GCP support. Our elastic security software platform also leverages enhanced network and APIs-based visibility, along with machine learning to automate and orchestrate network security controls in your data center. This both lowers the overhead of network security and expedites the process of successfully implementing microsegmentation policies, which helps speeds up our customers' time to value. ShieldX software also leverages deep packet inspection capabilities along with our on-premise deployment model, where our software exists on the inside of your current perimeter security platforms in order to deliver consistent east-west or lateral threat visibility and security controls across your hybrid and multi-cloud data center deployments. These application threat capabilities include intrusion detection and protection, advanced malware detection and protection, and IP and URL filtering capabilities. Customers buy ShieldX because they are both looking to improve their network security posture, their threat visibility, and lower the risk posture in their cloud data center, but doing so in a way that simplifies not only the deployment, but also lowers the long-term cost of managing data center network security. With that, I'll turn things back over to Marcy so she can kick off today's discussion.
Thank you very much, Glenn, and thank you, ShieldX, for being our sponsor today. We also appreciate our overall partnership with you. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists today. Our first panelist is, oh, there we go, is Chris Ray. And Chris, would you be so kind to introduce yourself? And I like the new look.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you. You know, it's part of the social distancing. It makes it easier as I get this look. People don't want to be around me.
As a mask too, you know, a little bit.
Yeah. But no, I appreciate being able to be here today and participate in this. So I am the CISO for TriNet, based in, well, I'm in Dallas. We're headquartered out of the Bay Area. And so we're a professional employer organization, which essentially that boils down to, we provide full HR services for small, medium-sized businesses, and that's everything from your HR services to your payroll, benefits, any legal support, training, all those type things. So we do that for thousands companies out there, which obviously, since they're small, medium-sized businesses, it's something that's quite impacted today from our customer base with everything going on.
Thank you very much, Chris. Ed, would you be so kind to introduce yourself?
Sure. Ed Usby with Gallagher Bassett Services. Head up securities and the CISO for them. So what we do is we are a third-party administrator, and we do claims management for either large companies who want to self-insure, or we help out other insurance carriers and brokers being packaged as part of their services as well. We're also part of the, our parent company is Arthur J. Gallagher, the insurance brokerage. So, along with Chris and everyone, looking forward here to be able to kind of contribute and share today as well.
Thank you, Ed. And Amit, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Amit Bhardwaj, I'm the CISO at Lumentum. Prior to being at Lumentum, I was a CISO at Rodan and Fields, it's a skincare company, and prior to that, I was a CISO at Clorox. This has been a fantastic journey, right? So far, in terms of an ability to, help protect organizations, throughout my career. Lumentum as an organization is in manufacturing domain, right? We actually help people move data at the speed of light. It's a really innovative company, that is focused around, both consumer and commercial aspects of working with lasers. So think of us as laser moving light and data. We can also cut a thick chunk of steel, right? Just like Star Wars. So a really fascinating company. Encourage all of you guys to look at us. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. Let's go ahead and jump into our first topic today, which is the challenges of cloud migration. As we know, cloud migration has been happening very fast, and but working from home has really caused businesses to rapidly adopt cloud services, much faster now. Business leaders expect our CISOs out there to maintain vigilance and control over the security risks, but really without impeding, the adoption of modern technology capabilities, and again, at that rapid pace of IT. What we're seeing out there is the problem of security solutions that kept data centers and end user systems, controllable and manageable, have really become pretty quickly obsolete. And data, is much more elastic and ebb and flow out there from businesses to customers and business to partners and beyond. And enterprises are really facing some of these challenges in the forefront right now. And I'm excited to have this conversation with all of you. So first, Chris, I'm going to throw this out to you. Where are you in your journey on the cloud adoption, and what kind of cloud environments do you currently have? And tell us a little bit about maybe some of the challenges you've had around cloud security as it might relate to the remote workforce. As we chatted before on the phone or before we got started today, there's really no travel going on at your company, so everyone seems to be working remotely right now.
Yeah, I'll start off with the with the impact that it's had on our environment with the current COVID situation. I mean, we already had aggressive plans to expand our usage of cloud, if you will, already for the year and moving into next year and beyond. So I don't feel that it necessarily affected it much with everything that kicked off. The key thing, without digressing in topic, was the company was ready as far as supporting remote workers, so we could continue with those efforts. And so that's been I'd say instrumental with being able to continue with our current plan. As far as the stage that we're in, in some of this, I'll talk either current company or past experiences with other companies I've been at. Right now, I'd say we're mature with a small scope, but we're expanding that quite a bit with our offering, because our whole offering to clients is our platform that people log into, and again, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people And so when we look at migrating that from brick and mortar type data center more to a cloud service, you know, there's going to be a lot of care and feeding into that. And so, and just, it's a big lift and shift. So I'd say we're, you know, beginning stages, or, you know, from that larger scope. And it's more, you know, the typical stuff that you see out there with Amazon and Azure and some of those areas. So I'd say the biggest challenge, you know, that we face is still just, you know, I mean, the complexity of putting all those controls into another environment, managing dual environments, that's a big one. And then looking at, you know, if we're going to have a multi-cloud and these different hybrid type environments, it just, each little piece complicates it even more.
Thanks, Chris. So Ed, I'd like to get your perspective. What is your security landscape looking like, and how are you gaining visibility from the, you know, east-west lateral access in the cloud right now? What is your perspective there?
Yeah, you know, for us, it's an area we're looking at trying to improve. You know, for us, when we moved to the cloud, it was more, you know, in pockets, and it wasn't kind of an overall decision that, you know, we're going to move with this governance and strategy around it. So for us right now, it's been trying to figure out how do we replicate a lot of the security features we want and do it in an efficient manner. So, you know, that's kind of where we're essentially in between solutions now, where we have a lot, you know, we're probably losing some, you know, we're trying to either deploy our kind of on-prem solutions in, you know, trying to fit them into the cloud, or in some cases having information from those environments run back through our data, loop back through our data center, just to get some of that protection on there. So, you know, that's why we're really looking at a next step, then looking at, you know, technologies that we can deploy that are more specific to those environments. And on top of that, trying to be a little bit more, you know, deliberate in terms of kind of how and why we're expanding a feature. More so at least we're making those decisions around, we're not just doing it because we think such and such technology is cool, or someone really wants to play around in AWS, but, you know, here's the guidelines in terms of kind of when we would sit and utilize AWS versus, you know, there might be instances where we'd use Azure. And even really in the, you know, kind of, you know, the environment we are now with everyone being at home, you know, for longer periods of time, you know, similar to Chris, we were able to ramp up current technologies, but there's now just a few areas where we want to improve. Like when you're looking at, you know, collaboration tools, that's probably a better fit to work in a cloud environment. But now we have the ability to have a little bit more understanding in terms of kind of what are we going to do to kind of get that protection in place, and not just, you know, slam it in and just figure it out later.
So, Amit, I'd like to get your perspective on what the differences might be about having your data center actually and your operations center in the cloud versus, you know, on-prem, and what are you seeing in terms of SOC processes evolving while adopting these multi-cloud environments or even hybrid environments? How are you seeing that from your perspective?
And I think I would agree, you know, both with Chris and Ed, right? I think the organizations are evolving in the sense that I think the cloud journey is already started. I think every organization, or, you know, is definitely heading in that direction, and we are not different, right? So we have a similar approach in terms of, you know, hybrid cloud, right, which is a private and a public cloud strategy. I sort of see it as a, you know, I don't see it as a cloud strategy. I see it as a business strategy now. It's all about, like, you know, where the business is going, what are the demands of the business, right, and how IT is going to step up as a partner to enable some of those things. And as we go into this journey, right, I think as a CISO, you know, we always think about, you know, the risk and how we're going to protect those environments, right? And that's, you know, when I come to it, like, you know, I understand the business strategy, I understand, like, you know, how are we going to deploy certain workloads, and I think it's all about, you know, about ensuring, like, you know, we have the visibility, the protection enabled, and then an ability to scale in the sense that, you know, we can leverage, you know, the existing tools, systems, processes, and people, such that, like, you know, we can adapt quickly, you know, to the cloud migration that we are seeing.
Excellent point, Samit. I'm going to go ahead and jump on to our next topic around choosing the right cloud security options. I think there's a myriad of them out there, and so there's a lot of, this is why we're here today, to sort of talk about that. But there are some that work better than others out there, and some want to maintain the practice and tool sets that they've built over the last several years. And unfortunately, some of the traditional agents out there and network security tools such as firewalls, and they're just not really suited for this kind of hybrid, cloud environment, especially, when it comes to scale and automation and some of the architectures that are out there. So it's a bit challenging, wouldn't you say, overall, gentlemen?
Yeah.
So I'm going to lob. Oh, okay. I was just going to say, Amit, I'd love to get your perspective, because you have this really neat perspective of, working for ShieldX now and some major companies out there. What class products and tools have really, you think, are improving the security posture? I mean, I certainly understand there's an answer there of ShieldX, but, how are you viewing SaaS and IaaS and PaaS as you determine the best options for businesses out there? And I would just say, like, from a perspective of being a CISO, at an end user company, and now being, a thought leader at your company, what can you offer everybody here today?
Yeah. So again, I think, anytime, there's going to be a con, there's always a pro, with the technologies that we have seen, right? So let me approach it in a different way. I think, if you think about organizations that need segmentation, and I think, we can obviously talk about, like, a lot of pros and cons about segmentation, but if you go into a segmentation based approach, right, I could, argue on both sides as to what makes sense and what does not make sense, right? So I'll go like this, right? If I take traditional firewalls, right, the Palo Altos and Fortinets and the checkpoints of the world, the best thing I can use is like, hey, listen, I have the infrastructure in my data center. I don't need to go buy something new, but I can leverage my existing hardware and infrastructure. However, you also have to start thinking about, hey, what is the scaling mechanism of these hardware and infrastructures that I currently have? I'm saying, as we go into cloud, the whole idea about expanding and multiplying and ability to move fast exists. How quickly or how much can my existing hardware, take the load that I'm trying to put on those, especially when you don't have the control, in the sense, like, the hardware expands on need base, right? So talking about the PaaS and the IaaS and the others, it's all about, what can my traditional mechanisms do for me? The other thing, that the other way of thinking about it is like in a host based, right? I can use my host base, like I can use the Guardicore or the Cisco Tritration or Illumio. I can use a bit of those approaches. And I think, again, the easy thing for me is, hey, it's a easy endpoint process visibility that I can use a network-based approach, and I don't really care about a hypervisor that's running on these environments. But then again, the challenge is that I need to create a workload, an application, right, that has to be new for every new agent or version upgrade. It's really complicating the entire strategy for me, right? I think that's how I sort of think about them. And again, the micro segmentation agents are not, agnostic by themselves, right? Like, they have to be manipulated. They have to manage ACL tables. There's a lot of time, that it takes, right, to sort of manage them. I can even take a hypervisor and an infrastructure-based approach, right, where, hey, they all come natively with them, right? I can use a VMware, NGX, NSGs in public clouds. I can use any of those based approach. They're natively available to me. But then again, the challenge is automated policy generations are not available. Each of them, there's a specific knowledge that I need from a staff perspective. And then more importantly, there's no deep, layer 7 inspection capabilities that are available there. And then you can think of something like ShieldX, right? Like, which is, sort of a broader deployment, easy scale up. But also you have to understand, like, what it means from a virtualized and a multi-cloud environment for you, where, like, how that's going to play together. So again, as I said, you really have to understand, like, what the needs are, and sort of apply, the cyber models that will work for you and the organization.
So Ed, thank you very much, Amit. So Ed, you have legacy systems, I would imagine, correct, out there?
Yes.
And how have you dealt with this problem, and who's helping drive some of these decisions, and how is it working with, the security administration network firewalls in your organization? Are you seeing friction from, the infrastructure and ops teams and your security administrators, and, with the DevOps folks over here, and a lot of stuff going on? So how are you dealing with that balance overall?
Well, we saw it at first. We're really, I think we started seeing kind of that, that initial kind of, friction and kind of push and pull against each other was because we started, and our division was one of the ones that did it first, just started moving to the cloud for a couple of, probably more pointed purposes. But what happened was, so infrastructure it wasn't really the frustration that we were moving or trying to bypass them, but it was just more the lack of knowledge. So it kind of, when, it's kind of human nature. If you get asked a question you don't know the answer to, you somewhat, at some points you try to sit and wish it away. So if I just ignore it, it may not come back. And it led to this just, finally we're trying to figure out, like, okay, well, why are we not kind of, why are these conversations keep dying? Like, we need, the deployment is going on. We need to figure out, kind of how are we securing it and what are we doing there? So we finally just kind of jumped in, took it over, went to the outside, brought in just consulting expertise, saying, fine, if the only reason is, there's not a cloud expert sitting within, within our group here, we will bring someone in. They'll act on, they're acting as a cloud security architect, but they'll partner and be in lockstep with our infrastructure group to help provide, them that understanding. And that's really what kind of, helped us make the initial pushes. And, for us, just because of, the timing, the initial thought process was, well, let's figure out what solutions do we currently have in place that we can kind of deploy into our environment, and, B, kind of what can we use native within those environments. We know it wasn't perfect, but that at least is a first step to have some base level of security in place, so we could at least be comfortable with kind of going live, which we did that. Now the next step is taking a look at, now we've been there for some time, taking a look at, what do we currently have in place, and now what's our future growth going to be? What are the solutions that make the most sense, both to secure those environments as well as integrate within kind of our current landscape too, within our current monitoring and, within our SOC. And that's where it's a lot of, you look at these trade-offs in terms of, there might be a great standalone tool, but then does it have that much more, is it that much more efficient and have that much more functionality based off of, something that I might be able to have within my current package? Because, every time obviously, the cost of bringing in a new tool to implement is the ability to have to maintain it and train someone and how to use it. So, we look at a lot of times, and there are a lot of technologies that are worth it out there. So that's really what we're the part of looking at now, is kind of evaluating, what's the best approach with now that as we have a lot more of an understanding of what it is we're really doing in that environment.
I'd love to get Chris's perspective here. And what stage in your organization are you going through the similar things as Ed? And have you thought about even adopting container-based types of solutions, between your DevOps folks and your cloud solutions? So is this something that you guys are thinking about, considering doing? Love your perspective here.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One of the key advantages, I'd say, is, with migrating to the cloud is getting the container workloads, the production workloads. But it's one, again, where it's a maturity thing. So you got to be careful. It's the crawl, walk, run. It's amazing listening to these discussions because it ends up being the same problem many of us, older folks that have experienced for decades. It's just a new technology, and now we got to be able to do these same kind of controls and stuff, but in an environment that is moving much faster, and we have to be able to keep up. So I think, we're not at a full, we're not doing production workloads on like a, elastic Kubernetes service. We're still doing like the Amazon machine images. So it's a maturity thing, but I think we have to build that out and look at the tools we're using and how we can make that quicker, more efficient, kind of like what Ed was talking about too. Because you still have, even with containers, I mean, you're still going to have the same security issues that you have to look at today. What kind of apps are you going to have in there? What's their level of importance? Who can access them? How do you validate code, before it gets pushed up to there? How do you look at configuration, API management? I mean, all that stuff. And so we're building that, but it's still a progressive state before we go full on with leveraging containers, for our workloads.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to ask that we go ahead to our next topic. What are our best practices for cloud security today? And I think a lot of folks on our call are going to be really interested in our thoughts on our best practices. As we know, security cloud requires a lot of different measures that for security in the data center, and CISOs are always accountable for the security breach. So the buck stops with you guys and gals that are out there. And you want to ensure, but you're upholding the best practices. And when you're dealing with a cloud vendor, it is a shared responsibility out there in general. So, lots to think about as you're kind of thinking about how you're securing your cloud environments, and each of them have their own nuances, and there's just different points of, even in your side of your organization, how they're utilized and what people think about them and everything like that. So I'm going to start with Ed. How are you thinking about a shared responsibility model between yourself and your team and your different business units and even your security vendors? And are you kind of really defining some of those best practices around roles and responsibilities? And what are you telling your partners, your third-party vendors, about encryption or monitoring and things of that nature? So love your thoughts.
Oh yeah, so the monitoring piece is key, and for us we're a bit unique because we have obviously we have some of our own applications and environments that we're running with like AWS and Azure, but we have one of our key business applications is a vended app that runs in an AWS environment. So we have this additional layer where we've really integrated this vendor into our into basically almost our IT department and our IT environment here, where they're almost an extension of us, where we have a lot of say in terms of what's in that, basically what are the configuration, how is that AWS environment configured? We're pulling logs both from the application as well as from AWS directly to be able to make sure we're doing that analysis, because we know we can't just sit and if there happens to be any data breach within that environment, we can't just push back and say, well, it was them, it wasn't us, because from our client's perspective, they're an extent, they're part of us in that sense. So that's one key piece, is just that the vendor accountability and making sure that we're really treating that like it's ours, and not saying, not kind of having that push that, oh well, it's someone else. The other key piece then, even just with some of our environments, is really just, again, taking that same approach. We work in lockstep between our group, our architecture group, and then our infrastructure team to really make sure we have those same processes in place. We are pulling logs even just natively from those environments into our SIM, so we're doing that analysis. We're still maintaining obviously the benefits from from running in there. You know, a couple of things that, you know, we made sure some of the challenges we brought up even operationally is, you know, making sure, especially in, you know, Azure as well, where, you know, you can run up your bill pretty high if you don't sit and realize that you need to turn services off as they're not being used. That's one of the key, you know, differences that, you know, we pointed out early on. So we kind of were able to, you know, manage that cost savings. But that's really a lot, you know, what we've been doing to be able to, you know, ensure that, you know, we're both, you know, keeping it secure, but still kind of, you know, gaining those efficiencies as well.
Well, thank you, Ed. You know, Chris, I'd love to get what your thoughts are on your current security priorities and how are you evaluating technology right now out there? And, you know, what are you hoping to achieve in securing, you know, your cloud environment overall when you're looking at these technologies?
Oh, I mean, again, it's going to be getting that visibility. A lot of the things we touched on, it's going to depend on your approach and, you know, what little pieces you're doing. Hopefully, again, I've seen some places where they just want to do everything and think they can just move the whole data center over without doing gradual steps. So obviously that's a different security priority that you have to factor in as opposed to taking a low and slow approach. But I'd say the biggest thing is still getting that visibility. You know, there's native tools that you can do with some of these environments, or there's other things that you can look at, you know, third party that integrate, you know, so it's making sure that you're still looking at the fundamental things. A lot of it I feel comes back to the fundamentals. What are you doing to look at, you know, your vulnerability management? So you don't just, you know, do containers and all this other stuff that has the new buzzwords there, but you're missing the fact that you still got to make sure you're elevating code properly, you're checking it, you're doing your scanning, you're looking for anomalies or just any kind of things that go bump in the night so you can be alerted for your SOC. I mean, you still have to factor in all those fundamentals. So to me, it's making sure you still have those things in place. And it's especially important from my standpoint to make sure you have reference architecture guidelines for the company, because depending on where you're at with this, if people just explode into the cloud, you want to make sure that stuff's already in place. So there's already guidance for the teams out there that are implementing this.
Thank you, Chris. You know, do you think a zero trust model could be employed to protect cloud-based security architectures? And, you know, what other strategies might have worked around monitoring and controlling user access right now? What are you seeing overall?
Yeah, I think, you know, you bring up a good point, right? In terms of zero trust networking, I think every CISO out there would agree, like, you know, there has to be an approach, and whatever that approach is, a combination of tool, people, process. How do you continue to, you know, enable automated tiering, grouping, any zoning that, you know, you have to do, or micro-segmentation, right? So I think the idea is that, you know, you really want to move in a direction where you can eliminate, you know, the flat networks. You can have a policy which can be more adaptive to maintain compliance. I think, you know, to what, you know, Chris just mentioned in terms of ensuring, like, you know, your images and, you know, the configuration items, you know, for your cloud workloads are kosher. We've seen a lot of threat in that dimension. We also need to understand, like, you know, how our elastic environments, you know, have some real-time protection enabled on these workloads, right? I think that's really the key in terms of ensuring, like, you know, hey, you know what, how can a CISO sleep at night? You know, and I think one of the ways is the whole aspect of, like, you know, either virtual patching or somebody defending your workload when a vulnerability may exist. And I think to your earlier question where you asked, you know, what are the challenges with the infrastructure team and the business? It's either taking a downtime or applying the patches on a timely basis. And I think that's where, you know, if you had like a sentry stand in front of your workloads and protect those workloads, I think is an absolute must-have in a CISO's world today. And then I think, you know, the last I would say is, like, you know, a sort of a logical separations within applications, right? So how do you sort of keep them separate? while continuing to sort of provide the workload optimization and utilization that our organization needs.
Thanks, Amit. And I just want to say thank you to all of us, all of you guys here for sharing some of your thoughts. We're going to shift gears because we've got a number of Q&A coming into the Q&A window. So let's get that part of the program started. And I love that we have so many questions today. First from Robert Pace. Any adjustment on retention period in the data in the cloud, since longer storage could increase costs? Any thoughts there, gentlemen?
So
I'll say move it internal. Move it internal.
All right. On to our second question from Thomas Targeson. How are you addressing the skills gap with regards to cloud expertise? This is a good question. Is it something you're outsourcing to a third party to assist with ongoing, or are you working to build out with a team internally? And can you touch on some specific challenges with this regard and how it's being overcome? So Ed, do you want to tackle that, or Chris, or?
I can take that one, right? I think, I did talk a little bit about, as I was talking about, some of the things that you can do, right? Like, if you want to go, a traditional firewall to host-based, or any hypervisor-based or something else. I think that is a challenge, right? Like, in terms of both, from a cyber security skill set, along with like, the infrastructure / product-based skill set. So we definitely see this as a challenge area. And I think that's why, like, if you or organizations can sort of streamline, some of the key tools and processes, and those tools and processes can then work with, a bit out, or like, many vendors out there, that plays in a big role for us, right? And say an easy point in time you could say is like, Palo Alto, like, the compatibility there might be high. ShieldX does the same thing, right? Like, they allow us to protect multiple infrastructure components out there, right? Like, without us having to learn about each of those different hypervisors and such, right? So it's an easy plug and play that way, that allows us to sort of, adapt and move very, very quickly.
Yeah, for us, what we saw was we really sourced more of the architecture piece. We sourced the architecture piece of it because that's something that we knew really wouldn't be a full-time job going forward. It was really more needed for the initial setup, but then at the same time made sure that the folks that we had that run a lot of our technologies, that they had the ability to be able to be trained to using those tools going forward. Because that's really more where we needed the long-term was in folks being able to actually manage and understand those technologies.
Okay. Well, our next question is also from Thomas Targeson. Given the speed of cloud adoption by organizations, sometimes by end users without IT's knowledge, governance seems to be a significant challenge. Have you adopted any specific governance approaches that have been proven beneficial to properly managing this challenge and ensuring adequate risk management? That is a great question as well. Okay. Any thoughts there, gentlemen?
Sure, I can talk about this, right? So, I think, instead of the word governance, I like something called enablement. Governance seems to be like, too policey. I think of it as enablement, right? The enablement approaches that, we have enabled, right, is, allowing our infrastructure services, right, like, with, I would say, like, a bit of a cookie cutter approach, right? Like, we use standards that are out there that allow them to deploy things fairly easily. We use tools to monitor any changes in policies or any changes in configuration items that are out there. And then, applying typical approaches around user-based analytics and such. That way, like, we can keep a pretty good eye on the environment itself. And obviously connecting with your infrastructure friends is the key. So you can really understand, some of the utilization patterns and such to ensure, like, you understand, like, where what your cloud loads are doing, out there.
Thank you very much. On to our next question from Avinash Palti. What are the best practices for API security and policies, and what audit requirements should there be for cloud API security? Any thoughts there? Meet, you want to take that one?
I can, Avinash, good question on the API security aspect, right? So API, domain is changing, right? With the MuleSofts of the world and such, right? Like, and OAuth standards improving or improvising. For us, one of the approaches that, we have taken is to really understanding, like, what API workloads we are running, along with, like, what are those APIs carrying along in them. We understand, APIs, may do activities internal. So it could be an internal to internal, it could be external to internal, external to external, and then, obviously external to internal. So you really have to understand, like, where, what the APIs are doing. And then based on each one of them, we have applied policies and restrictions where we may trust internal to internal a little bit more than something we would trust an external to external. I'll give you an example of an external to external. Say, like, we have a workload that runs or API call that, we run between Workday and Salesforce. Both are external platforms. So my level of security on those is going to be much higher than two servers that are sitting in my data center, and the trust level is definitely higher there. But we'll ensure, like, they're encrypted, packet inspection, stuff like that. Like, we'll enable on the API policies and security protocols.
Perfect.
It really ends up still being the same thing. We got to have that visibility. You can't just assume because you have containers out there, things that it's all good. I mean, you still have to make sure those checks are in place.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Marcy.
That's okay. I'm just trying to get through all the questions. There's so many good ones here. Any data that you wouldn't put in the cloud today, and why? From Todd Fitzgerald.
I don't necessarily base it on the data. I mean, it's the same risk factors as before. Don't risk a lot for a little. So if you can, again, start small. And Todd, I know you know this. If I'm stating the obvious here, but it's just, obviously the more sensitive the data, you want to make sure you really have all those controls in place, because a lot of what's happening. And I'm all for being, I know we try to get away from saying we're being a roadblock, whatever, but I'll tell you, they're going to come to you and they're going to sit there and hold you accountable. And so I'd say the more sensitive, or if it's public, I mean, you've got to be the roadblock so you don't put yourself in a spot, and make sure that it's got all those controls, because I see more companies where they're just letting go of some of this, because they just want to accommodate and have that speed to market or time to market to help the company deliver, but don't risk it.
Yeah, to Chris's point, that's, I think, a lot, it's a lot, same thing we see as well, as like you said, don't be scared to, if you're not comfortable with how that environment is being built out and being secured, be comfortable in saying, no, we can't go live, or we can't put it there yet. As long as you have, it comes down to your risk management, your risk tolerance, in terms of, if you're comfortable with, in terms of the controls that are in place there, then there really shouldn't be a limit. There shouldn't be a limitation. But again, it's just making sure that you're not having, an aggressive business partner and being pushed to acquiesce to an area where you're just not comfortable.
Last question. For those that use multiple cloud providers, GCP, AWS, and Azure, is there a methodology where the workloads are run, and how do you integrate your processes across a hybrid cloud environment? Any thoughts there? That one's a pretty complicated one. You could do a whole session on. All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. A couple of things for everybody. Please complete your survey today, and if you do need your CPE credits, let us know so we can send you the proper paperwork. I want to say thank you to ShieldX for being our sponsor. Thank you to Amit and Ed and to Chris for being on our panel today. You guys were very, very interesting, and I've learned a whole bunch of new things today as well. And I hope our audience did. Want to make mention that our ISE West Executive Foreman Awards program will be hosted digitally on August 20th, so I hope many of you will join us. And September 2nd, please join us for the ISE Central Executive Foreman Awards that will also be virtual. And October 6th, we will be also having ISE Northeast. And nominations are being accepted for ISE Northeast and ISE North America. We hope to see all of you on a future ISE Fireside webinar or ISE Cocktails and Conversation and some of our ISE programs that are coming up. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. And again, thank you for joining us. And gentlemen, thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon, and everyone stay healthy and safe.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.